What's up, everyone? Aaron Nagler here with Cheesehead TV and your Packers Daily Chat, coming to you live on all the Cheesehead TV social channels, because we're here for you, Packers fans, worldwide. We're dedicated to you. What's up? How was your weekend? How's everyone doing? People jumping in the live chat already. Good to see everybody. Aaron Harper starting us off with a QB at 30, question mark. Feels awfully early for me. I think they're a year early prior to wanting to find the eventual successor for Aaron Rodgers. We talked about this, I believe, last week, but maybe 2 weeks ago. Now, if there's a guy that Brian Gutekunst absolutely loves sitting there at 30, maybe he takes him, seeing as he does have 2 first-round picks. But I tend to believe anybody that is going to be the kind of player that you would want to be your heir apparent to your franchise signal caller, you probably have to take him at 12, if not before. This is not a very deep, rich class when it comes to the quarterback spot. Now, you never know in the draft. I mean, Aaron Rodgers is an all-time great, and he dropped to 24, so who knows? But 30 this year feels a year early to me. Looking sharp. Thanks, guys. Yeah, it's amazing what a little bit of a shave and a haircut can do for you. Thanks for all that you do, Alex. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for checking it out. Could you see the Packers signing Rodgers, Saffold, or Landon Collins? I'll be surprised if Saffold actually makes it to the free agent market. But if he does, I think he'll have a lot of suitors. In this day and age, it's hard to find line help as it is, and talented guys like him making it to free agency, I think there'd be a bit of a feeding frenzy. And I tend to think that would probably put him out of the Packers' price range, although you never know. Now, Landon Collins, if he does indeed hit the market, which I think he will, I think the Packers need to be all in on that. I don't know if they will be. I don't know how Brian Gutekunst is going to prioritize his offseason build, but Collins is a guy I would go after with a full court press. No doubt about it. He would come in and solve a lot of problems on the back end for the Packers. Kyler Murray at 30, if he makes it that far. As I was saying before, it feels a year early. I love the kid's talent. Obviously, he declared earlier today that he is all in on football. His pro day is the same day as the opening of free agency, March 13th. So it's going to be a busy day around the NFL. I would be surprised if the Packers went that route. Are any of the Packers scouts paying attention to the Alliance League? I know for a fact that at least one of them is. $12 million per for Collins? Yeah, I'd probably go that route. I mean, that sounds like a doable contract, and he'll probably hit a little bit more than that. Although I didn't see the numbers today for Eric Reed in Carolina, didn't get a chance. But I tend to think Collins is a much better player than Reed, and I think he would command a better salary. Do I consider 51 a pass rusher? I consider him an outside linebacker who got to the quarterback with somewhat regularity comparative to his peers in 2018. I mean, he's got some moves. He's shown that he, has progressed from the complete hopelessness that I believed he was, even as recently as this summer. I wouldn't ever, and I've said this plenty of times over the course of this season, I wouldn't ever look at Kyler Fackrell and think, well, that's it. The Packers are set when it comes to rushing the passer. I don't think that's the case in any way, shape, or form. I think he's the potential to be a great complementary player. Problem is you shouldn't be starting complementary players if you want to make it to the Super Bowl. Is there any way we can get our pick back for Cole Madison? No. Any chance Nick Perry wants to retire? I don't believe so, but I haven't spoken to Nick about it. Should the Packers move on from Nick Perry? I think they should. I've stated that a few times. His tape last year was disconcerting, to say the least, prior to his going down with injury yet again. I've had some people with the Packers kind of push back on the idea that it was effects from his lingering injury from earlier in the offseason, or actually from training camp, when he missed all that time. You remember, he missed a good chunk of training camp. And that's all well and good, but you're judged by what you put on tape, and what you put, on tape between the white lines was pretty damning. when it comes to Nick Perry and just a complete lack of productivity, really. I mean, I understand that you want to be out there for the team, but if that's the case, you got to produce. And we've seen Nick Perry do that in previous years where he's had the club or he's had a tweak of the knee, etc. But he's carried on and at least set the edge, so to speak, at least exerted some bit of pressure on the offensive tackle. Whereas this year, he was pretty invisible, down in and down out. Other than the big strip sack that he had, or strip fumble that he created in week 1, outside of that, any memorable plays or actual plays from Nick Perry were few and far between. And you cannot go into 2019 and expect him to suddenly light it up. I just don't think that that's realistic thinking. And I don't think it's a way to construct a roster that has to be overhauled. It's what I put in the title here. There is a roster here that is, I won't say in desperate need, but it is definitely in need of a major talent infusion. Now, obviously, Gutekunst will take the entire offseason. Player acquisition is an ongoing thing, and it's not like the entire thing is going to get solved in a week or even a month. But moving on from Nick Perry, regardless of the dead cap hit, I think is a smart decision. And I understand that the pushback somewhat to that is that with Clay Matthews walking out the door, which is presumed, and then say if you do go ahead and cut Nick Perry, well, then you are at Kyler Fackrell and Reggie Gilbert as your starters at outside backer. But there is free agency, there is the draft, there is the ability to replenish your supplies, so to speak. I just think the Nick Perry contract is an unfortunate one at this point. Now, all of that said, everything I just said, I think they'll probably keep him around for one more year. J.K. Scott is a weapon. Leave him be. Someone tell Banky. Mike, hi, what's up? Thoughts on Le'Veon Bell? Seen a post on ESPN saying we should get him. Sherwin, I vehemently disagree with that assertion. I know ESPN put something out there. I know my buddy Pete Doherty has written on it a couple times. I just think you have so many needs and so many deficiencies and only so much cap space to the year after you give your starting quarterback the richest contract in the history of the NFL to then turn around and to hand a approaching $20 million a year contract to a running back, which traditionally is a position that has the shortest shelf life in the league, as an aging guy who has now missed a full year of football, and a position that the Packers have shown. I mean, they won their last Super Bowl with a, kind of a mishmash of talents at that position. Would it help Aaron Rodgers to have a strong running game? Yes, but I think they can do that without putting a humongous contract at one position. Devin White at 12, I love it, man. I'm all in on that if he's there. I think they'll have a few choices there. Maybe they go, Devin White. Maybe they go the tight end from Iowa. A lineman could fall. We'll have to see. Cole Beasley or Adam Humphries? It seems like I answer this every chat, and I'm happy to do so. I would take Cole Beasley. I think he's got just some excellent quick twitch in short area quickness that is something that the Packers have really lacked for quite some time on the offensive side of the ball. And I think he, with LaFleur's offense, could really cause some problems for defense. Do you think the Packers will take Hawkinson at 30 if he's available? Carlos, I will be very surprised if he's available at 30. That doesn't mean he can't be or won't be, but I think he's going to get taken well before that, possibly by the Packers, maybe even at 12. But would I be surprised if they did it at 30? I would love it. I think he's got a chance to be a special talent in the NFL. David Montgomery in the second round. I love Montgomery. He's probably my favorite back in this draft. Certainly a possibility. We'll see. I mean, I'd be surprised if they used a premium pick on a running back. If they picked a back prior to the third day, I'd be surprised. That said, when they took Eddie Lacy, that was because they thought the value was too good to pass up. Both Ted Thompson and Mike McCarthy spoke on it, where You know, they had no plans of drafting a running back heading into that draft, but when they saw Lacy still on the board late in the second round, they had a first-round grade on him. They thought you know, it was too good a value to pass up. They thought he was a really good football player, and they wanted to take him. If David Montgomery is sitting there at a spot where they think he's an incredible value, yeah, then it wouldn't surprise me. But is that value at the high second? I don't know. We'll have to find out. John Brown over Cole Beasley, in my opinion. Dustin, I think they're both valuable assets that the Packers could use. I think Brown is much more of a, obviously, take the top off the defense type. Yeah, I was really pushing for them to get him last year. They didn't show any interest, and I'd be surprised if they turned around and suddenly went after him this year. But I think they do different things, right? Beasley and Brown. Brown is much more, I mean, he can work all over the formation, obviously, but I think where he would be most valuable in Green Bay is getting deep and taking that safety with him. Whereas Beasley, I think, can do a lot horizontally and in the true West Coast kind of area. Will I be at the Combine this year? Yes, I will, Mike. I most certainly will. I'm going to try and put together some kind of hello, beers, come hang with Aaron and drink beer and talk about the Packers kind of thing. I was just trying to find a venue, a spot. I don't want it to be like big and stupid like the NFLPA did and Peter King's does every year. Like, I want just something really cool and small. So, but when I do, I'll let you guys know. Any comp picks coming this year? No, Scott. One of the repercussions of dipping your toe in the free agency waters is that those comp picks dry up. And because the Packers went out and were active in free agency last year, they have no compensatory picks in 2019. Is Breeland coming back? TBD. We'll find out. His contract is up March 13th when the new league year starts. As of yet, I have not heard anything or read anything reported that the Packers and his representatives are talking, but they could re-sign him. I think it would make sense to, but we'll have to find out. We'll have to wait and see. Let's head over to Twitter, see what's going on the old tweet machine. Matthew starts us off with, I know a premier pass rusher is a nice thing. A nice thing, says Matthew. However, with a premier pass rusher last year, without a premier pass rusher last year, we finished top 10 in sacks and pressure. Talk all season was how our linebackers need help and O-line. Why is that forgotten? I don't think rusher is the primary need. Whew, Matthew, a lot to unpack there. Well, I don't think it's been forgotten. I've talked about the offensive line, especially guard, being a priority pretty much all season and off season. As far as linebackers, somebody before mentioned Devin White. I think that's a possibility there sitting there at 12. I don't think it's a question of you pin positions by importance to a pick. They're not sitting there at 12 going, we have to get a pass rusher. But I think pass rusher is a good possibility at 12 because I think there will be a few on the board. If you mock out how that first round kind of plays out with team needs, and now you've got another quarterback in the mix with Murray's announcement today, I think there's a good possibility that there'll be a decent pass rusher sitting there for them at 12. And look, they have gone year after year after year being able to justify not taking a premier pass rusher or taking pass rushers in general on the first day because, you know, Dom Capers generated plenty of units that got to the quarterback, that generated lots of sack numbers. It's great that you can be in the top 10 in sacks, but when and where those sacks are coming and how they are being generated, you know, that matters. And you look, especially early on in the year in 2018, a lot of their sacks were coverage sacks. And wouldn't it be nice if you could get those coverage sacks and couple those with a few where your outside backers win a one-on-one on occasion? I mean, it's almost a miracle when it happens in Green Bay these days. I mean, obviously, Kyler Fackrell had a few games, the Buffalo game, the Seattle game, where he won some one-on-ones. He won a great one-on-one against Whitworth in the Rams game. But outside of those, they're few and far between. And if you can get a guy who can be disruptive and you don't have to generate pressure and you don't make Mike Pettin work as hard to generate that pressure, then I think it makes a lot of sense to take a pass rusher. But again, it's got to make sense. You can't just reach and say, we got to get a pass rusher. Doesn't matter if the guys that are left available on the board, if they're not quite as good, but it doesn't matter because they're pass rushers. You don't want to do that. Bad teams do that. Will Rodgers have as much freedom to change plays at the line in LaFleur's offense as he did in McCarthy's? Really good question. I think it's going to be a partnership. They've both kind of, I know LaFleur has talked about it kind of at length. Rodgers has really not spoken about the offense yet, but I know they're going to work together. You got to think that LaFleur is going to give him a lot of leeway. I can't imagine he's going to come in there and be really kind of buttoned up and regimented about it. I think it'll be similar to what Adam Gase did with Peyton Manning in Denver. You know, that said, it'll be his offense. He'll design it, and it'll be worked through his concepts and his scheme. But I think Rodgers will have a heavy say both in the huddle and at the line, and in the week during the, in the meeting rooms. Eric Reed just signed a 3-year deal with Carolina, as we mentioned before. That got me thinking: are the Packers able to sign Breeland now, or have to wait until free agency? Thanks for the shout out, Ryan. No, they can sign him at any minute. They could be signing him right now, for all we know. The contract extension for any of those guys could come, whether it's Breeland or any of their other pending free agents. I don't think guys like Cobb or Matthews are going to get a call anytime soon, but Breeland, they could sign him at any moment. Who are the top 3 guys in this year's free agent class you'd like to see us target? So hard to say right now. I get this question pretty much every day, and I always like to keep the answer out in the ecosphere, so to speak. It's really hard to say now because we've got long lists, right, of pending free agents. But as we've already seen, there are going to be guys that are locked up and re-signed by their clubs. There are guys who are going to have the franchise or transition tags placed on them, and that is going to vastly alter the landscape of free agency, or what is expected to be available in free agency. So ask me that question again after the tags are applied, at least. And we've gone through some re-signings. I always go back and look at when Nick Perry got his contract. There was just a glut of pass rushers that everyone thought were going to be available, and then it got down to everyone getting tagged and re-signed, and then Nick Perry became the best guy available, which is pretty much why the Packers re-signed him. So, like I said, ask me again when we get closer to those days. Chase asks, what did the leadership see in Jaire that they didn't see in Derwin James or Van Der Esch, 2 other positions of greater need? I love Jaire, but I feel like we'd be better having kept Randall at corner and drafting James or Van Der Esch. What say you? I love this because the way you've written "What say you" makes me think of Aragorn in Lord of the Rings in Return of the King when he says, "What say you?" Anyway, sorry. Had to geek out, nerddom there for a second. What do they see in Jaire that they didn't? Well, okay. None of those, I mean, it's not like they went in with this long arching plan of we're going to trade Randall and then we're going to do, like, the Randall thing is like completely separate. I didn't agree with it. I didn't like the idea of trading Randall. I thought he was playing really well down the stretch in 2017. But obviously that was a locker room chemistry thing that Gutekunst has clearly shown means a lot to him. Whether it's that, whether it's getting rid of Ty Montgomery, whether it was trading HaHa Clinton-Dix. These were all locker room chemistry things. And the trading of Randall was the same thing. He was not going to come back with Gutekunst running the shop. That's very apparent. So, what they saw in Jaire, I don't think it was a question of they saw something in Jaire that they thought was better and or more important than what Derwin James or Van Der Esch would have offered. I do think he saw the Saints offering a first-round pick and thought getting 2 first-rounders in 2019 was worth dropping down for. They obviously they like Jaire. He had a promising rookie year. I think Derwin James is going to be a big regret going down the line here. I think Jaire is going to be a very good player. But the thing is Gutekunst has to, and I've been saying this again and again and again, I'll probably say it all offseason, this is it. This is the offseason where the team becomes Brian's. Last year he had a lot of hangover from Ted Thompson's time in Green Bay. But now after this offseason, tons of guys coming off the books like Matthews, like Cobb, lots of salary cap space opening up, a bevy of picks, including 2 first-rounders. This is the offseason where he makes it his team, where he makes it his roster. And there'll be very few Thompson guys left. So, yeah, I don't think it was a question of they thought Jaire was so much better than Derwin James. I don't think that would have ever entered into it. But I think he saw an opportunity to position himself long-term. And as I always say, don't forget, when GMs are constructing rosters and making moves, especially a guy on his very first time being a GM, he's got a 5-year deal, he wants to make sure he gets another deal. He wants to make sure that after 5 years, he's offered the opportunity to continue in that job. So I think that was very much a move, setting himself up. It's kind of like what Thompson did when he first got here, or in Green Bay. That first year, he ripped apart the offensive line, put some Band-Aids on there. A couple other spots did the same thing. All the while knowing that he was setting himself up. And that's very much what Gutekunst did last year. He set himself up while still, if everybody stays healthy last year, I think they have a shot to go on a run. We all know that didn't happen. It all kind of fell apart. But, he was hedging his bets a little bit. He had them, good enough that they could make a run if they stayed healthy. But more importantly, for him, he set them up for the next 3, 4, 5 years. Hopefully. That's what he's, banking on this offseason. We'll see if he was right. He's got to do the do. Do you believe the Packers were cursed the moment Mike Ditka donned the Green Bay sweater? I don't believe in coincidences. Maybe hiring a butt kiss evens things out. No. All right, let's head back over to the live chat. See what's going on here. The fastest player in the draft is Andy Isabella. So far, people talking 40 times. I love it. Thoughts on Sweater Polite? Montez Sweat is an interesting prospect just because of how strong he is and what a kind of a wrecking ball he looks to be. But to me, he looks a little bit like Nick Perry coming out. And that might give me pause. Polite, I like, don't love, but I got to do a lot more film work on him. So ask me again, say, during the combine. How often do you think MVS will be used in the offense? I think he'll be nip and toe, what's the phrase I'm looking for? I think he'll be kind of platooning with Geronimo Allison. I think the two of them will kind of, most likely, at least early on in the year, line up opposite Adams in the formation with Adams, etc. They'll kind of back and forth for the number 2 spot. I do think eventually MVS in his if he takes the jump he should from year 1 to year 2, I think eventually he'll be your full-time number 2 guy. I think his athletic upside is just a lot greater than Allison's. Do we target a running back or a wide receiver in the draft this year? Austin, we discussed running back earlier. If there's a value there, I don't think it's out of the question. Wide receiver is interesting because they obviously took a bunch last year, but I don't think you're ever going to sit on your hands if there's one of value there. But I'd be surprised if they used a premium pick on either position. How about signing back Sitton or Lang? Oh, I don't see that happening. Both those ships have sailed. Is Finley affecting the team with what he is saying? No. Julio to Green Bay. Woo! Someone started early. Give me some of that. So the AAF, your thoughts. Devin, thanks for asking. I watched on Saturday night as my Orlando Apollos were victorious, starting off the year 1-0. Love me some ball, coach. I found it interesting that there was kind of a wave, right? Of everybody watching and going, oh, hey, this is kind of cool. Like, hey, we're watching football. It's after the Super Bowl, but there's still football on. It's great, blah, blah, blah. And then by Sunday, everyone was like, ooh, this is football. Ooh, football. This is not football, blah, blah, blah. And one of the main kind of talking points or criticisms that I've seen is about the quarterback play and offensive line play. Well, yeah, look at the NFL. They can barely field offensive linemen and quarterbacks in that league, in the best league in the world. So, of course, the trickle-down league is not going to have quality play at those positions. And I think that's a big opportunity for the NFL, whether it is the Alliance, whether it's the XFL next year. If one of these leagues becomes kind of a proving ground, training ground, developmental league, which the NFL has needed forever, I think there's real possibilities there. And I loved some of the broadcast ideas. I got to be honest, I didn't miss kickoffs. Didn't miss them at all. And I loved the ability to look at the replay ref as they made the decision whether to overturn things. I love the speed that they did those things in. There was a lot there. Oh, and I think the number one thing I enjoyed was watching quarterbacks get hit. I mean, my God, it's been so long since I got to see some real slobber knocking hitting on a quarterback. I mean, those prima donnas sitting back there, knock them in the dirt, man. I love it. I love it. No flags, no nothing. Just pure adrenaline hitting quarterbacks. That was my favorite part. When do we get Apollo transplants, Daniel? Not anytime soon. Next, was John Lynch overrated? Whew, that's a whole separate video. Overrated. Was he overrated? No, I don't think he was in the past tense overrated. I think there's a lot of kind of revisionist history going on now with his campaign to get into the Hall of Fame. Not his campaign, but his candidacy for the Hall of Fame. Look, he was a very good player. He was in a very good defense. But Warren Sapp was the Hall of Famer most deserving in that, and he's in, obviously. And then there's Brooks, who's obviously well-deserving. And those two are what made that defense go. Obviously, Barber was a big part of it, and Lynch was a big part of it. But those two guys in the middle were what made that, or the engine for that defense. And this idea that Lynch has now been a finalist twice, kind of blows my mind in comparison to a guy like Leroy Butler, who was so much better as an individual player. When the Bucs were in the Super Bowl, the opposing team wasn't designing their offense around minimizing John Lynch. They were designing their offense to try and minimize Warren Sapp. The Broncos in the Super Bowl were designing their entire offense around negating Leroy Butler. Not Reggie White, Leroy Butler. That tells you how great Butler was. And the fact that Lynch will undoubtedly go in before Butler will never sit right with me. Is there any chance that Sterling Sharp makes the Hall of Fame? I would say an outside chance, a real outside chance. It's funny because we've finally seen a little bit of the logjam of wide receivers start to break these last couple of years. We got to get Butler in first, right? Who actually was there, had a pretty long career comparatively, and did win a championship and was a great player. I mean, Sterling Sharp is probably the greatest player I ever saw on the football field in my lifetime. He was absolutely incredible, absolute difference maker, and there's zero doubt he would have walked into the Hall of Fame as a first ballot if he had played an entire career without getting cut short due to injury. But it was. And there isn't precedent to put someone in who had a career that short. The problem is the most recent example, which is obviously Terrell Davis, won 2 Super Bowls. So unfortunately, in the eyes of voters, a lot of whom are old newspaper people, that narrative plays into it. And that's something that Sterling doesn't have in his corner. It's unfortunate. No one signed Hunt yet? Yeah, incorrect. The Browns signed Hunt this afternoon. Emmanuel Sanders, if released, should Green Bay target him? I wouldn't. I'd be surprised if they went that route at wide receiver. Now, that doesn't mean they won't or they couldn't, but I would not. Explain to me how Collins makes any sense. Our issue at safety. Oh, sorry, your thing went. Oh, let me see. I can bring it back down here. Our issue at safety has been in coverage. We need a true free-ranging ball-hawking guy in there. Suspect in coverage plays down in the box. Matthew, I very much disagree with you there. I know that is the narrative around him, especially after this past season. But go back 2 years ago, and you'll see a very different player. I think he's a great all-around football player, and I think he's been put in some bad spots in this last season or so. But I think he would be exponentially better in coverage than almost anybody they have on the roster currently. Not that that's saying much, but I'm not so worried about, we need this type of safety. They need good football players, and he is a good football player and bordering on a great football player when he's right. So, yeah, I understand that distinction, and I understand what you're saying. I just disagree with it philosophically from a case of roster construction. Give me as many good to great football players as we can, and we'll figure out how to use them. Like Bill Belichick always says, tell me what he can do. Don't tell me what he can't do. That's just me. Nag, should we move on from Kentrell Bryce? Yes. Will we finally draft a good tackler? Zach, I'd love to see it. Been saying it for the last couple years. People keep lamenting the Packers tackling, and I can only say what I say each and every time the subject of tackling comes up. You have to draft them. You have to draft them. You can't teach it in the NFL. When they get to the NFL, there's so little time spent in pads. There's so little time spent actually hitting and having contact in practice. That almost never happens. So by the time you get to the league, you got to know. You got to know how to tackle. You got to know. You got to arrive with violence, and you got to know how to get guys on the ground in space. That's just got to be inherent. And the Packers have done a very poor job of getting those types of players on their football team. They've got a lot of athletes, which is great, but if they can't tackle, it doesn't really matter much. Do I think Donald Driver is a Hall of Famer, a Pro Football Hall of Famer? No. Packers Hall of Famer? Absolutely, 100%. But Pro Football Hall of Famer? No. Championships start at the line of scrimmage. I could not agree more. You believe what the media says? Come on, guy. Ooh, are we cooking up some conspiracy theories? Bring it. I wonder what Ted Thompson is doing right now. Probably watching this, cursing me out. No, I kid. He's probably down in Texas, chilling, looking at tape of a... Or actually, he could be in Green Bay now, because they had all the scouts come back last week to start draft meetings. So I'll ask. I'll see if he's in town. I know he probably won't be at the Combine, but I'd love it if he's in Green Bay, grinding through those meetings for the draft. Who is my favorite all-time Packer? That would be Bart Starr. 100% greatest Packer ever. And I know that includes Don Hudson, that includes Brett Favre, that includes Aaron Rodgers. Bart Starr is the man. Defense needs the weight room. Well, luckily they have one at Lambeau Field. If Driver isn't a Hall of Famer, then neither should Edelman. Yeah, because Julian Edelman shouldn't be a Hall of Famer. This whole Edelman in the Hall of Fame thing is just, it's talk radio nonsense. Don't pay attention to any of it. Is Matt LaFleur more like Kyle or McVay? I believe you mean Kyle Shanahan. Obviously, we will find out, but I have to think he's more like Kyle Shanahan. He's been kind of joined at the hip with him throughout his entire career. And I know he gets mentioned a lot with McVay because he was on McVay's staff out in L.A. They worked together in Atlanta and in Washington, or in Washington. They worked with Shanahan in Atlanta. But everything points to his philosophy, his offensive system and philosophy being driven from the Shanahan school. And I think that's where you're going to see the similarities much more so in that regard than with Sean McVay. All right, everybody, I'm going to have to jump. Thank you so much for all the questions. I'm sorry if I couldn't get to yours. They do fly by rather fast. Make sure you're hitting subscribe on YouTube or liking and sharing on Facebook. Join our Patreon, $5 a month. I'll be recording my next podcast tomorrow night with a very special guest. That's exclusive to the Patreon page. It's the only place you can get it. And your $5 a month goes to that and all this, everything we do here at Cheesehead TV, whether it's these videos, whether it's Packer Transplants, whether it's Pack-A-Day podcast, whether it's anything on the website itself. There's a lot going on. And $5 a month, I don't think is a whole lot for a whole lot of content that you get back in return. Can't thank you guys enough for supporting what we do here at Cheesehead TV, devoted to Green Bay Packers fans worldwide. I'll be back here Wednesday at 5, unless there's some kind of breaking news between now and then. Otherwise, make sure you're checking out the podcast tomorrow night, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks a lot, everyone.